Welcome to the VIP lounge here at CPhI Worldwide, where it's time for a chat, time for a sit down. I'm going to grab a chat with Khelan Patel from ProClinical. Khelan, thank you very much for joining us here. For anyone who isn't aware of ProClinical, what do you do?
Thanks, David. Lovely to meet you. So ProClinical has been providing human capital to the life sciences business for the past 15 years, from C-suite all the way down. And I'm here today to talk about, very excited by a new service offering of ours, which is our consulting offering in the regulatory supply chain quality compliance space. And what we do is provide sort of turnkey solutions to pharma companies where there is an increased regulatory compliance or quality burden. And I'll give you a good example. We're seeing a lot of consolidation in the industry now with M&As. Regulations are changing globally. And in all these instances, there is an increased need for regulatory support. So when there's an M&A, technical files and dossiers need to be re-registered, variations need to be submitted to agencies, and where a lot of companies then, their in-house teams face increasing burden in order to accommodate these changes. And so what we do is we provide bespoke specialist teams to help alleviate that burden so that in-house teams can focus on core activities. So that's a good example of right now where we're seeing the market going.
And which markets do you cover? I know you're based in London, but whereabouts else around the world are you based?
So we operate globally. We have offices in Asia Pac, in North America and Europe. So we can support clients globally, and that's one of our key USPs.
I guess there are different challenges in different markets, and organisations, perhaps they themselves are expanding into new markets as well. You're able to offer them a helping hand to make sure that they are compliant, that they understand the different challenges that they're entering into in those markets.
Absolutely. And a good example is, the drug development paradigm when it comes to registering a drug is changing. The traditional model was you would register in the Western markets, let's say the North America and Europe first, and then maybe one or two markets in Asia, Japan or South Korea. But now with the advent of advanced therapy medicinal products and a huge focus on orphan diseases, the rest of the world markets are becoming more important, right, for filing, including places like China. And therefore, depending on the type of drug, companies are struggling with providing support for developing in these areas, and that's where we can help.
Jolly good. And in terms of the other changes, change is inevitable. There's a lot of change, consolidation and so on you talk about. What are the other key changes you see over the next 12, 18, 24 months or so that you think are going to be impacting your existing customers and perhaps potential customers want to get in touch with you and talk about?
Sure. On the M&A route, which we're seeing clearly, for example, very relevant to CPhI is supply chain consolidation and streamlining. And every time that happens, it can trigger an audit with an agency, and a lot of companies then look to rationalize their supply chain, which means reducing the number of CMOs, for example, that they're using. That involves a regulatory filing, right? And so that's where we can come in and help support that filing. The other thing, we're seeing things like Brexit, things like for medical device companies, the new regulation, the MDR that's going to be implemented. The implementation of the Falsified Medicines Directive, all these things are causing an increased need for clients to outsource regulatory services.
Yes, I was going to ask, whereabouts does the move in and out of outsourcing at the moment, how does that fit and your approach in order to support your clients with their outsourcing requirements?
Sure, that's a great question. Outsourcing has become a model to implement efficiencies across multiple industries. We've seen it in telecoms, we've seen it in IT. The airline industry is a great example where back in the days of Pan Am, airlines would control baggage handling, maintenance, everything under their shelf. And all those things are now completely outsourced, and airlines operate at a very high level of efficiency. And I use the airline industry as a good example because it's highly regulated and safety comes first. So it's very similar to the development of medicines or veterinary products. So traditionally, pharma have been outsourcing to CROs for clinical operations. That is the biggest outsourcing spend, and then for for contract manufacturing to CMOs. Regulatory and pharmacovigilance is an area which is, we're seeing probably 10 to 12% increase in outsourcing over the next 5 years, right? And so that's the segment of the market, we want to service, right? Things like regulatory operations, medical regulatory writing, even strategic advice for early development. There's a need for. We're seeing a good example now is, we're seeing a big biotech boom when it comes to IPOs, raising money, and especially for advanced therapy medicinal products, right? A lot of these companies are, I would say, virtual. They have a small team, and they rely on CROs for their clinical operations. And there is a need for them to get strategic regulatory advice to help with preparation of dossiers, and then post-submission and approval to deal with the sort of life cycle management activities, right? And so the big benefit to them is they don't have to worry about, creating an HR infrastructure globally, right, and hiring permanent teams, which is not cost effective, right?
I guess the other side of the coin here, if you will, is organisations perhaps in different sectors that have outsourced in the past. If outsourcing isn't governed properly, if it isn't managed and resourced properly, outsourcing becomes insourcing again, and we're seeing that tide turn in some other sectors. Is that something you foresee in the pharma industry if it's not managed correctly?
That's a great question. One of the key benefits of working with an outsourcing partner, and this is something that we take very seriously, is the governance. Right, and that is a value-add service, and an outsourcing partner should be able to build a relationship and work seamlessly with the company or sponsor at hand, and that is something that is very, very important. And without that proper governance, and that's something that we offer. That includes project management and sort of end-to-end support for a particular project. Right, there is always that risk. There is a number of partners that companies can choose to work with, and what I see with an outsourcing partner is usually companies don't tend to switch a partner if things are going well. There are some companies that tend to use different partners for different things, and we see that in the CRO space. Some companies will use a CRO for central lab support, but they'll do their regulatory consulting with someone like us. So there is a risk of that happening, but I think as of now, outsourcing, like I said, is going to continue to grow over the next 5 years, in my opinion.
Really interesting stuff, Khelan. Listen, before we go, I just want to ask you about how your CPhI experience has been here in Madrid this year. You've been having a good time over the last few days? Absolutely.
The weather's been great. Today was a bit rainy, but yes, it's been amazing. Everyone that's involved in the pharma business is here. It's been great to network with a lot of colleagues and meet a lot of new clients. So yeah, absolutely. Amazing.
Listen, Khelan, it's been great to meet you here in the VIP lounge. I hope the rest of the show continues to be successful. And have a great rest of time here in Madrid.
Thanks, David. You too.
Cheers. Thank you, Khelan.